everyone, and welcome to the My Hero Therapy podcast, where we talk all things My Hero Academia and mental health in My Hero Academia. I am one of your co-hosts, Dr. Nicole Hassler, but for the purposes of this podcast, I am known as the intuitive hero, Psyche.
And I am your second co-host, Benjamin Tights, registered psychological associate. But for this podcast, I am the empathic hero, Pathos.
Keep in mind, this podcast is for educational purposes only. While we are both therapists, we are not your therapists, unless we are your therapists. It's good to see you again, Pathos. It's been a bit.
It has been a minute and a half, Psyche, but just like the heroes of the show have to go on their own separate missions sometimes, they always come back together. Boy, have we been on some missions.
We have. One of them was San Diego Comic-Con, though, and that was a pretty cool mission.
That was an awesome joint hero mission. The World Hero Authority did send us to San Diego Comic-Con, where we got to present we were technically on, 2, 3 panels?
Technically 3.
Technically 3. One of them, though, was different.
We don't talk about
that one. If our listeners do want to know about that one, they can message us on the social medias, and I will let them know how traumatic that was. But we had 2 awesome panels. One was My Hero Therapy, Heroes IRL. So we hinted at it in our last episode, folks, that we might be there. We were there. We dressed up as Toga and Overhaul. And we met.
You made an awesome Toga.
You were an amazing Toga. You looked exactly like her. I was just blown away by your cosplay. And we met some other really cool cosplayers dressed up as the heroes to face off against our villains. And we even got to share the stage with not 1, but 2 Aizawas.
Oh my God. The pictures we got with the 2 Aizawas, it was just phenomenal. And they both did such a phenomenal job. So shout out to Dr. Isaac Tights, one of our sponsors for this show out of All Mind Health. And Rio Shigeta, I'm probably not pronouncing that right, Shigeta? He was also an amazing Aizawa. He had a whole sleeping bag and everything. I don't know how he got through the con with that, but
he really internalized the real true spirit of Aizawa, which is, I want a nap.
Yes. And of course, a shout out to Dr. Scott Jordan, who was not in My Hero Academia cosplay. I will be honest, I'm such a noob when it comes to anime. I don't remember what his cosplay was or where it was from.
So he was dressed as Professor Edward Elric, which is I guess an older version of the character from Full Metal Alchemist, because my understanding of Full Metal Alchemist is the character was not a professor. But no, Scott is an older gentleman, so he's making it his own. It looked really good. He was Edward Elric as an older version, writing a book about your truth. Dr. Scott Jordan from Dark Loops Productions. Listeners, go check him out on the YouTubes and other podcasting places. But that was an amazing panel for sure.
And it was recorded by Kyle Rebar, our awesome audio engineer extraordinaire.
Yeah, we will be posting that when it's fully edited.
Yes, and because the panel was recorded, I do plan to upload it to YouTube at some point, and perhaps we'll put it up on the social medias for everybody to enjoy.
I think that sounds like an awesome plan. What was our other panel?
It was all about Marvel, right? It was the multiverse of Marvel, and we had quite the lineup of people on that panel.
That was a big one.
That was an intimidating panel, I must say. So again, it was led by Dr. Isaac Tights, who did an amazing job in his Doctor Strange costume, especially with all the hiccups that we had in the beginning.
Technical
difficulties. But we also had Dr. Elizabeth Hahn. We had Dr. Kayla
Joseph.
We had us, of course. We had Travis Adams, who I absolutely adore that man.
He's Travis, if you're listening to this, and I really hope you are, hats off to you, bro.
Yeah, you were so cool, man. The one and only Dr. Janina Scarlett was also on that panel, and talk about intimidating. My goodness. She is not a very tall woman, but I mean, she meeting her, I was so intimidated.
So folks who are listening who haven't heard me speak about Dr. Scarlett on my other podcast, Dr. Scarlett is like the All Might of superhero therapy, nerd therapy, just all of us. She's this big personality, this big warm energy. You know, when you first meet her, if you have been like a fan of hers, and this is going to lead us into our episode, folks, because it does relate. I promise. You know, you're going to be like Deku. I'm like, oh my god, it's Dr. Scarlett, and then she's just like, hi there, I'm friends with you now, and then that's it. And you're best friends with your hero. I first met her at a training that she did down in San Diego a couple years back before the pandemic. And I literally was like fangirling hard. And she's just the sweetest human being on the planet. So, Dr. Scarlett, if you're listening, we love you.
We do. And this is a story I don't believe I told you this, but you'll get the joke. Ben will get the joke. You all won't. But one of the questions that was asked, that Isaac had asked, was about variants. And he said, I want everybody to point to their variant in the audience. And I just hear Dr. Scarlett say, Nicole, I'm pointing at you. And I about died right then and there, because there is a running joke that I am a variant of Dr. Scarlett just because we have similar hair colors and we have similar birthdays, even like we were born like a month apart, and both have husbands that are into like the music scene. So I promise I'm not stalking you, Dr. Scarlett. I know it sounds like it. I'm so sorry, but I just wanted to tell that story because it was a moment for me. It was one of those. It's now a core memory for me.
You met your variants, and the multiverse did not blow up. So
it did not.
It was amazing. I didn't hear her say that.
Oh, I did.
But because I was on the other end of the table from you,
yeah.
So it was, and she speaks so softly. But I knew that you were pointing to her.
Mm-hmm. I didn't point to her until after she pointed to me because I didn't want to.
Really? In my head, I was like, oh, Nicole's going to point to Janina.
I thought that I would come off as really weird if I did that. I don't know why. So when she said that's when I pointed at her, because I was like, okay, I'm no longer weird. I'm validated.
You're not weird. You are unique and amazing.
Oh, well.
So, yeah, just like Psyche here meeting her hero, Episode 2 of My Hero Academia picks up where we left off, where Izuku got to meet All Might.
His hero.
And, I mean, Psyche didn't kind of babble so much as Deku did, but I think in her head she might have been. So our scene starts off with Deku asking All Might that personal question that he needed someone to validate him. Can I still be a hero despite not having a quirk?
Yeah.
Oh, God. The first scene of the episode, and I was broken.
It was very hard, but before we even got an answer to it, so we know that is how the first episode cut off, was him asking, can I be a hero too? And then that's where this episode, aptly titled What It Takes to Be a Hero, picks up. And of course, we don't get that answer right away, because why would we be able to do that? Yeah. They got to make us wait a little while. But what was interesting is that they show that, Deku's very much in awe of this man. He clearly admires him. He values his opinion. And we're seeing All Might showing a lot of weakness here. We're seeing him.
A lot of vulnerability.
That he is not necessarily this all-powerful being that Deku has made us think he is. Mm-hmm. He mentions, there's a quote that he says, because, he's talking about how he smiles, smiles all the time to show that he's not afraid, but he says, there's always plenty of fear behind that smile.
I'm supposed to be the guy who's always smiling, right? People everywhere have to think that I'm never afraid. But honestly, I smile to hide the fear inside.
And it's clear that he's been injured in some way, that he's not this invincible being, but he still acts in a way where he's like, you know, people have to think I'm never afraid.
Yeah.
I can't show weakness. I can't, you know, which goes into a whole line of other things to talk about. You know, people, you know, having that idea that you have to portray yourself a certain way. But I just thought it was interesting, like seeing those weaknesses.
Absolutely. I thought it was especially powerful because not only, you know, this is a person who is a professional hero who's talking about having fear, but how he has to cover up that fear and smile, you know, to reassure people. It really kind of brought me to, like, you know, in modern Western society, I can't really speak to Eastern society, but at least in the United States, there's a lot of stigma about mental health and about showing your emotions and showing fear, and who is allowed to experience that and who is not allowed. And, you know, if All Might grew up in America, which I don't know if he did. I mean, you know, we don't know that. I don't think he did. But I know, you know, there was a movie where he was in America. We could talk about that in another episode. But, you know, in America, men aren't, the only emotions that men are allowed to feel are anger, hungry, and horny.
Pretty much.
You know, that's not a lot of emotional range. And because we have to be strong. Here we see the strongest of heroes admitting to some weakness, to some vulnerability.
And again, like I like that you touched on the male aspect of it, because that's immediately where my mind went to, was that, you know, men can't show that they're afraid. They can't show that they're sad or anything like that. And women, it's a little bit more acceptable for us to show those emotions. However, there's a stigma that's associated with all of that as well. So, you know, if we're crying because we're sad or we're having a lot of anxiety, a lot of times we're looked at as we're hysterical or, oh, it must just be that time of the month, right?
Yeah.
Or she's just crazy. Whereas it's like, it's perfectly normal and natural to be having these emotions. It's perfectly okay and acceptable to feel these emotions. And we should be allowed to feel them without judgment.
I mean, that's why they're called feelings. They're meant to be felt.
Exactly.
I am sure that this is a conversation that, Psyche, you probably have with your clients all the time. I definitely do in all areas of my professional practice. Validating emotional experiences is something that a lot of clients find really difficult to accept, just because of how they might have been brought up. And around the stigma, you know, it's like, okay, we have these emotions. That is valid. What we need to decide is, how do we want to respond? How do we want to manage them? You know, what meaning are we going to give them? How much weight are we going to put on it? And, you know, for so all of my clients are male. I work in forensic work with parolees. So we have a lot of men who have these very distorted views as to emotional responses and what is okay. And like I said, angry, horny, and hungry are the only ones that are okay. And I was like, fine, if you're going to feel angry, fine. That's valid. But is it helping you right now? And in what way is it helping you? Let's figure that out. And then we can decide, how do we want to use that? Fine. If we feel angry, we're allowed to feel angry. What do we do with it? Because punching someone in the face, while it might feel good in the moment, isn't really going to help you at all, really.
And again, too, like not being able to feel and express some of those other emotions, you know, burying them deep down is just going to create more issues than it's going to solve. Almost like explosive type issues. Yeah, no pun intended whatsoever there.
Not at all. You didn't say that.
Because this is a theme that we're going to revisit time and time again throughout this series, because there eventually comes a character that I really, really love in this series that kind of shows, that not even kind of shows, does show us that it's kind of manly to feel some of these emotions. Yeah. And you can be a big, strong man and still cry, and that's pretty manly.
Absolutely, and that was a big part of our panel at San Diego Comic-Con.
So check it out.
Check out, you know, when that video gets edited and posted to all the social medias, please check it out. Keep an ear out for that part of the panel. But yeah, well, going back to, our scene here. So yes, All Might did kind of admit to some vulnerability, but he also still was trying to hide it. So he wasn't fully open with his experiences. He wasn't fully open with his emotions. But we also, in this first scene, while All Might is revealing his secret vulnerability and everything, we get some flashbacks. And we see, that Bakugo and Izuku were childhood friends. That they played together, they went on adventures together, and then, Bakugo got his quirk, and he became the coolest kid in town. Or at least that's how he viewed himself, it looked like. And Izuku just admired him, just looked up to him, and was always a dreamer. And Bakugo was like, "You're an idiot for dreaming." Oof, an idiot for dreaming. If that was the case, then I don't think society would have evolved.
Someone's got to teach that worthless nerd how the world really works.
In that scene, we're seeing that goo monster, the goo monster that All Might saved Deku from, is back because he unfortunately was able to escape because, well, let's face it, Deku distracted All Might by clinging to him while he was jumping from his roof. Deku has, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, Deku has really poor ability to recognize danger.
Yeah, and he's got some impulse control issues a little bit. Just a little bit. Which once again, it kind of ties into my theory that he's got some ADHD going on a little bit. He may not always be able to control some of the things he's doing.
As someone with ADHD, I feel that he does. Because that would have been me. If I was meeting All Might, I would have been like, "No, don't leave me. I have more questions."
Exactly. I have a question for you. Which again, like before we get into the sludge villain, the question: can I still be a hero without a quirk? And what does All Might say to him, Pathos? He says no.
So can you be a hero, not without a quirk?
How heart-wrenching. He says, I don't think you can be a hero without a quirk, but you can do other things.
But you can do other things. You can be a police officer. You can help people in other ways, which, yes, is true.
But is that what he wanted to hear?
That's not what he wanted to hear. And, part of me, the rational part of me is like, okay, well, All Might is being realistic here. Deku does not have a quirk. The professional hero career requires you to fight villains with quirks. So, realistically, I'm using air quotes that my listeners can totally see me doing, not. But, realistically, no, Deku can't be a hero without a quirk.
It's not bad to have a dream, young man. Just make sure your dreams are attainable, realistic. Understand?
But in this setting, there's a way to express that. There's a way to validate your desire to be a hero and maybe reframe what does it mean to be a hero. If I was, and you know what, I think I've had this conversation with a client. I just can't remember the specific client, but they were asking, well, I want to be this kind of thing. But I struggle with these required components. And I was like, okay, what does it mean to be this profession? What does it mean to be this kind of person? And what are some ways that we can still internalize that and express that meaning in our life while still being mindful of our limitations? Obviously that would be if All Might was a therapist and was telling Izuku that would probably be how he did it, but All Might is not a therapist. He just bluntly said no.
And we later on, and now this is the big guy, right? So Mom tells him, "I'm sorry, Izuku. Nobody else believes that he can be a hero, but this is All Might."
Yeah.
All Might's word carries so much weight for him. Mm-hmm. And the next thing we see is Deku. He looks incredibly defeated, and he even says this line where he says, "Deep down, you knew this all along."
Yeah.
This is the first time that we really kind of see Deku feeling we saw him in the previous episode where he's like, well, then I just have to, believe in myself because nobody else believes believes in me, and he's pushing forward, and he's like, I'm still going to be a hero, and he's laughing like All Might and all that kind of stuff. But now it's hit home because his number one hero told him no.
Yeah. And that really, you could see it. The animators of the show did such an amazing job showing the devastation in Izuku's face. It wasn't just the classic anime, like, disappointed look on his face. It was deeper.
It broke my heart.
It broke all hearts, I think. If someone's heart was not broken by that scene, then we need to talk. they need to come see us professionally.
Yeah, please do. Let's talk about getting in touch with your emotions a little bit.
Moving on, Izuku is in shock. He is despondent. He's devastated. But All Might now is explaining himself. And so this is better. All Might is opening up. He's talking to Izuku, and he's being vulnerable here. He's saying, hey, being a hero is hard. There's a lot of really tough battles that can take a lot out of you. I had this villain attack, and I lost half of my respiratory system.
And stomach.
And now I can only be a hero for 3 hours a day. Now, as much as I would love to only work 3 hours a day and still get paid my normal rate, that would be awesome. I would not feel as fulfilled, I don't think.
No, especially if that's what you know, and you take pride in what you do and you enjoy what you do. To go from being this invincible symbol of peace. I mean, he is the symbol of peace, right? Mm-hmm. But then he's vulnerable. Yeah. He can't do what he used to do. He can't be who he used to be.
And I think
that's hard, as anybody can tell you, in terms of like identity and whatnot. Like when you can't be that person that you used to be anymore, it's a struggle and it's an adjustment.
Yeah, and I think All Might here, the way I read it, is he's still struggling to make that adjustment. Because you saw him earlier, he's like, oh God, I gotta go, but I don't have enough time. Like I need to do all these things. He wasn't really being mindful of his limitations, or at least fully accepting them and acknowledging that it's a part of him. And I think because he has these limitations, he's become a little cynical. He told, Izuku, I'm sorry, you cannot be a hero without power. Be realistic. And that's where I don't like the whole realistic talk, because that's not realistic. That's just defeatism. That's the way I heard it, as defeatism.
And even to go as far as to say, like, you could still be like a police officer or a firefighter or something like that. Like, what makes them any less of a hero than an actual pro hero, aside from the fact that they don't have a quirk? Like,
they have quirks. They have quirks, but they're not allowed to use them. So only the pro heroes can outwardly use their quirk. So by that logic, yeah, absolutely, it would be fine for Deku, who doesn't have a quirk, to be in a profession, a first responder profession, where quirks aren't really used anyways. But, here in those scenes when we have seen police officers, they don't really do much compared to the heroes. And that makes sense, because they're not legally allowed to use their quirks to do their jobs. And so they have to rely on the heroes. So really, in this world, the police officers just become like, traffic cops kind of thing. They're like mall security.
I'm thinking of All Might. Yeah, I'm thinking of, if All Might were a therapist, like a good reframe on that. Like, you could still do things like be a police officer or a firefighter. They're just as heroic as the rest of us, something.
And just in different ways.
Yeah, something of that nature. But that's just not what he gets. And so now he's just so unbelievably defeated.
Yes, there are limitations to what these different professions can do, but they do still have meaning in society. And I mean, okay, maybe you're not saving someone from a big villain, but saving someone from like a small-time crook, a robber, a mugger, that's still meaningful to that victim. Mm-hmm. And to be able to provide reassurance to that victim on an individual level, I think, because we see that throughout the anime. Spoiler, Deku reaches out to all victims. He cares about the little person. And So in my mind, yeah, Deku probably would have been a great police officer if he would have gone down that road. Road? That's not a word. Road?
Yeah, pretty much.
Road. Forgive me, people. It is morning time where I am. I just woke up like an hour ago, so if I just start.
Good morning.
Good morning. So going back then to the Sludge Monster.
Yes, Sludge Monster's back.
Sludge Monster is back. Cue evil music. So Sludge Monster is back. And he's taking over Bakugo.
Oh no!
And he's like, "Wow, what an amazing vessel with such a great power, and I can really use this. Thank you for letting me take up shop in your body in a very gross way again." And basically, Bakugo's trying to fight back in the only way he knows how, which is boom,
blow it up,
blowing shit up. And that's only making things worse here. He's destroying the alleyway and the shops and the buildings, setting everything on fire, which is then making it harder for the heroes who are able to attend. Now they can't do anything. All these heroes, they try to jump in, and because Bakugo's explosions are so big and the fires are getting so big, they're like, you know what? I this is not something that I can handle. I need to step back, take care of the civilians, and just hope that someone else with a more suitable quirk will come in.
Yep.
Yeah, that's also problematic, but
And again, like, this is where we kind of see the failings of some of these pro heroes, like
Kamui Woods.
Like, there's fire, so obviously he's not going to be super helpful here because he's made of wood.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to burn. Mount Lady, she can't get through, which this one I was a little iffy about because she's like, oh no, I can't get through because it's only one lane. I'm like, so shrink yourself back down and get through it. Like, I don't understand why you would not do that. But I guess we have to show weakness and
we have to show that, these heroes are limited because, even if she got through as a normal size, her power is to grow big. So she needs to be able to go big, and the alleyway is tiny also. So
it's too tiny. But what was interesting to me, too, about the Sludge villain and Bakugo was even though Bakugo was fighting back, he sounded kind of scared.
Yeah. It was very slight. I'll be honest, my first watch through, I didn't hear it. It was only after watching it again for the, 20th time that I was really listening with a mental health professional's ear. He had some fear, but I think for him, based off of his words and the way he's refusing to be a victim, and he's probably cussing out the Sludge villain with a sailor's mouth, I don't think his fear is for himself. The way I see it is he's afraid of being seen as a victim. He's not afraid.
That's a good point.
He's not afraid that he's going to get hurt. He's afraid of being seen as a victim, and that's why he's fighting back so hard. He's like, I will not be a victim. F you. I think that says a lot about Bakugo in this phase of his existence. And we have seen it a little bit in the first episode where he cares so much about the image of I'm the best. Well, if you always build yourself up to be number one, and then when you have vulnerability, hint, hint, All Might, it's really hard to express that fear.
So to kind of put it in like mental health terms, it's almost like a narcissistic injury, that it's a blow to his ego to be seen in such a vulnerable position. Yeah. Despite the fact that he's fighting back as hard as he possibly can, it's kind of like all for nothing because it's not helping his situation. And all these onlookers see him fighting and are saying, oh my goodness, like he has a kid, that poor kid, all that other stuff. And so that makes a lot of sense, that fear of being perceived as a victim rather than the fear of, oh my God, I might die here.
Yeah. I want to clarify for our listeners, narcissistic injury doesn't mean that Bakugo has narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah.
Does he have some narcissistic traits? Yeah.
Sure does.
But we're not diagnosing him with any disorders. And also, even people without those traits can still experience narcissistic injuries. It's, as our wonderful Psyche said, it's a blow to our ego. When we build ourselves up in a certain way, and we're seeing ourselves only in that way, and when something challenges that view of ourselves, it is very, very painful. And we see that not just with Bakugo, but also with All Might here.
Again, the same thing, being the symbol of peace, and then he's got a physical injury to show for it. But again, he can't be the hero he once was. And how hard of an adjustment that is for him to go from being this all-powerful number one hero to, I can only be a hero for 3 hours before I shrink down into the super skinny, for lack of a better term, he kind of looks like he's on drugs.
Oh, yeah, when I first saw that, I was like, that's the animation I wanted to go with? Okay.
All right. Well, to each their own.
Yes. Well, I mean, maybe he was high on power.
Could be.
And he's coming down off that high, I guess. I don't know. I mean, we could talk about his power, quote unquote, air quotes again, people, but that's a spoiler, and I'm not going to do that to you.
But when we're also going back to the scene, we see these onlookers, they see the sludge villain, they see the heroes really aren't able to do anything. And one of the onlookers happens to be Izuku Midoriya. And of course, now we get into this self-blame cycle where he's blaming himself for the villain escaping because, let's face facts, it kind of is his fault.
It's his fault. So here, the self-blame is appropriate.
And he's also saying, All Might can't help now because All Might could only be a hero for 3 hours. And he says he wasted his energy on me. It's my fault. And so now not only is he blaming himself for the sludge villain escaping, but he's blaming himself for the reason that All Might can't fight back. And really, he's the only hero equipped to deal with this monster. And he can't do anything. And we even see All Might looking he's in the crowd as well. And he says the words, "I'm pathetic." Which again, could be, again, that narcissistic injury speaking, like, I can't be who I once was, and now I'm sitting here watching as this kid is getting devoured by this sludge villain, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, and both Izuku and All Might are blaming themselves. All Might is saying, oh, I can't help because I'm weak.
Mm-hmm.
And Izuku is like, I can't help because I have no power. And this is all my fault that I made this situation possible. And what can I do to fix this? He's so desperate. Izuku is desperately trying to tell himself it's going to be okay. Like, something will figure it out. Like, and then his eyes, again, I'm making hand gestures that the audience cannot see. The pointing to the eyes. The pointing to eyes. He makes eye contact with Bakugo,
and then something amazing happens. He runs to him. He runs to Bakugo. He doesn't even think about it. He just goes. This quirkless teenage boy who has been bullied by this kid for most of his life springs into action to go save him. And he says the words, "I couldn't just stand there," because Bakugo's like, "What are you doing? I couldn't just stand there." And just a note, this is going to be important for a future episode, which is like way down the line, but it's incredibly important because this is a foreshadow moment as well.
And, Deku is saying, my legs moved on their own. And Bakugo is asking, why are you here? What are you doing? What's wrong with you? And Deku is like, but you looked like you were asking for help.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if the look in Bakugo's eyes was asking for help, but the fact that Izuku saw that in his childhood friend / bully really says a lot about Izuku.
It really does, because as you mentioned earlier, he cares about the victim. He cares about the little person, which of course Bakugo would never ever want to be viewed as a victim, or the little person.
Blow my head off.
Probably would, but you know what? It's cool because I said what I needed to say. But that's just how it is. Izuku, to a fault, almost cares more about other people than he does himself. I mean, he's not even. There's no way he's equipped to take on this villain. We've already seen that in the previous episode, but yet he's running on his own accord to try to help anyway. And this is important because we see All Might standing back there watching this happen. And he says, and this is a great line where he says, pros are always risking their lives. That's a true test of a hero. And that's exactly what Deku did in that moment. He risked his life. He has no way of defeating this villain, but he's going to try anyway.
And I don't remember if it was like in this scene or in the next scene towards the end of the episode where All Might was saying how like a lot of pro heroes, when they talk about their, those moments, they're saying, oh, my body just moved on its own. And that's exactly what Izuku said about himself. My legs moved on their own. And so, but by Izuku's selflessness, he was able to inspire All Might to say, you know what, yes, I have limitations right now, but I'm still going to do what I can to help. And All Might was able to muster up enough power, enough strength to bulk up again, swoop in, save the day, yay, All Might. And, the villain is defeated, and, the heroes are lecturing Deku. They're like, you shouldn't have done that, you stupid kid. And Bakugo is being praised. Oh, you brave soul, you brave boy. And
whenever you're ready, you could be my sidekick.
Oh my gosh.
Even though he just destroyed half of the city with his erratic explosions, he's getting all of this praise, and Deku's getting nothing but lectures.
Yeah, and you would think also someone with the kind of ego of Bakugo to receive this praise would be good, but Bakugo don't seem too happy. He is pissed. He's pissed. He was glaring at Izuku, and later on, the next scene, Izuku's walking away. Izuku's walking home, I think, and Bakugo runs up to him and is like, how dare you try to show me up?
Don't think you can look down on me! Huh? You're just a quirkless failure who won't even cut it as a Rent-A-Cop! I don't know you anything! What was that?
I could have helped myself because I have powers and you don't, and don't look down on me.
I owe you nothing.
I owe you nothing. And so, friends at home, sometimes when I am doing therapy with clients, I can challenge them a little bluntly, where I just am a little just like, really? Is that really? Like, I can be like that. Because sometimes when we have these cognitive distortions where we are telling ourselves a story to kind of make ourselves feel better, sometimes we need to be directly challenged. And if I were to be right there with Bakugo, I would be like, really? You owe him nothing? You could have helped yourself? Really? You kind of were destroying the city. So maybe rethink that. And then that would be when he blows my head off.
It's interesting, too, and I do apologize for the background noise of all the dogs barking. I don't know what is going on, but apparently they will not stop barking.
There's someone breathing too close to your house.
Yeah, or there's a sludge villain outside. I'm not really sure. We'll find out soon. But it's interesting because I brought up this particular scene with one of my clients when I first started watching My Hero Academia, because I was so mad at this scene. Because I was like, Bakugo had a chance here. He had a chance to be like, you know what? I still don't like you, but thanks anyway, or something. Like, he didn't even thank him. And it was interesting because my client said, well, he's like, that's not really Bakugo's character. In a way, he is thanking him, just in his own way. By even acknowledging what Deku did is a way, for the way that he was in that moment, or at this time period of his life, that was his way of thanking him, just by acknowledging what he did. And of course I'm like, well, who's the therapist here? But but it was. I kind of thought about it. I was like, okay, you're not necessarily wrong there. Like that really, I mean, he could have just pretended like it never happened. Deku was only getting lectures. He was never getting any sort of recognition for what he did. But Bakugo was the only one that really came up and was like, I don't need you, and I owe you nothing and all this other kind of stuff. Even though it isn't a formal, thanks a lot for trying to help. It's more his way of acknowledging what he did, but in his put down sort of way.
Well, I mean, he's acknowledging Izuku's existence here.
Which is
probably even harder for him than to thank him. He's acknowledging that Izuku was able to do something that he feels he should have been able to do. Emphasis on the word should, because that goes back to that identity. Bakugo builds up this identity. I should be the strongest. I should be able to do this. I should. And when we have too much of the shoulds,
I hate shoulds.
You're shoulding yourself.
You're shitting yourself.
You're shoulding yourself.
I know.
And Bakugo was shoulding himself right there.
Exactly. And, and we say this all the time. At least I say this with my clients when it comes to shoulds and whatnot. Is this really the appropriate time to use the word should?
No.
If it's something that pertains to your morals, such as people shouldn't kill each other, that's appropriate, I would say. But if you're shoulding yourself, I should have been able to handle this situation, I always ask my clients, would you hold everybody in the world to that same standard? Would you hold your mother, brother, father, sister, best friend? Would you hold them to the same standard? And the moment that they say no, I'm like, well, then that's a self-critical should. And that means it's not appropriate here. Now, for Bakugo, though, everything would be a moral values related should in his mind, because he'll feel like everybody should be able to handle themselves in that situation, with the exception of probably Deku. Yeah. But exactly what you said, that's the word should, the moment I hear it, I'm like, it makes me cringe, because it's just, again, it's not always appropriate to use that and to put yourself at such a high pressure situation.
To put that expectation on yourself. That's not a very realistic expectation. It's not self-forgiving either. It's not really, it's more shame-based in this kind of context. Bakugo is shaming himself for being victimized. And, unfortunately, this does happen a lot with people who are victims of crime, victims of assault and other horrible things, that they do blame themselves, and they I should have been able to do this. I should have been able to escape. I should have been able to calm them down. I think here Bakugo is kind of going through that, because to accept that you are a victim of anything, of whatever, for everybody is hard, and that's that narcissistic injury that everybody goes through when they are victimized. But only when we can accept that, yes, I was the victim here, and we can forgive ourselves for not being this perfect being, only then can we start to say, okay, well, how do I want to support myself in becoming more like that ideal self?
Absolutely. Yeah. It is a hard thing to accept. I think for anybody, I think we've all more or less experience this at some point or another. I mean, even in the mental health profession, we always feel like, when things happen, when our patients aren't doing as well as we had hoped, or they do something that causes them more issue than anything, we start shoulding ourselves. What more could I have done? I've had patients that have had to go to, emergency psychiatric facilities and, because they've attempted suicide or things of that nature. And I'm always like, well, what more could I have done? And I immediately start blaming myself, when the reality is that sometimes there isn't anything more that you could do. It's really not on you.
Yeah. And also, it's not your place to make these decisions and choices for our clients. I've had this conversation with my supervisor at work quite often. This comes up for me, working in forensic work, where I'm trying to help people to make different choices in their lives, to not go back to prison, to rebuild their lives and be better human beings. When they do commit new crimes, when they do go back to custody, I remember when I first started there, I was like, should I have seen that coming? Should I have been able to stop them? And my supervisor just flat asked me, well, what would you have done? to stop them from committing that crime. And I was like, I couldn't, because I didn't know they were going to do it. Exactly. I can't know everything about my clients, and I also can't control them. I can't make the choices for them.
And to get a little personal for a second in regards to the victim mentality, just recently I was dealing with a medical issue, and this medical issue went on a lot longer than it should have. And I say should because that is an appropriate use here. I had been in multiple ERs without getting any sort of help or treatment. I got treatment, but it just took a very, very long time to maybe get some treatment. And even that wasn't enough to help the situation. And it caused me to essentially have what we in the field refer to as an acute stress response. So it's basically similar to post-traumatic stress disorder. It's just shorter in duration. It doesn't last. An acute stress response would have to last for longer than a month to be categorized as full-blown PTSD. But because I had continuously reached out for help and was asking for help and I wasn't getting it, I developed this acute stress response. And it took me a long time to accept that I was the victim of a broken medical system. And it wasn't until I was really able to accept that I was able to move forward, because I kept feeling ashamed. As a mental health professional, I should be able to deal with this. I should be able to get through this. I don't need, I don't need to go to therapy. I don't need medication. Like, I should know the right things.
Like, I am the therapy.
I am the therapy. I am the medication. I don't need, I don't need this. But that's just not true. And I had to accept what happened to me. I had to accept that I was the victim of a broken medical system. I had to accept that I needed help. And I wasn't able to move forward until that was, all recognized. And the same here goes, for Bakugo, not being able to accept that he was a victim in this situation. And now he's got to deal with all this pent up rage as a result, which is not going to help in his healing journey, I would say.
No, probably not. Though, for our dear listeners who probably have already seen all the episodes of the anime, they'll know that he has some moments of growth. We can look forward to, but I won't share when those moments are right now because I don't want to spoil anything. No. But Bakugo isn't the only one who has been faced with this kind of need for acceptance. All Might comes in after Bakugo leaves. And of course scares the shit out of Izuku. Like showing up out of the blue, and Izuku's just like, "Oh my god, you're in front of me again, dude! You just met him. You already met him. You know his deepest, darkest secrets, and you're still fangirling so hard. I love it."
All Might, where'd you come from? How'd you get rid of all those reporters?
I stand for justice, not sound bites, because I am All Might.
It's adorable.
It is. But All Might is like, hey, you inspired me to accept this thing about myself and to not let it define me.
When I saw this timid, quirkless boy try to save a life, it inspired me to act too.
All Might basically told Izuku, because of your selflessness, because of your heroic nature, I was able to see that my weakness, my vulnerability doesn't define me, and that I can still be a hero. And then he says to Izuku, that question you had, can you be a hero? You can be a hero. You are a hero. So again, my heart just, broke into tiny pieces. I started crying, as happens whenever I watch this anime.
As we watch Izuku on the ground crying because he's finally been seen, he's finally been validated by somebody who's very important to him. He's on like the same level as his mom, I would say, in terms of all of that. And he's finally, after all this time, being seen and validated, and you can just see that emotion pouring out of him and how that feels for him. And it's so great. And then as this episode is ending, one of my favorite lines, you hear Deku say, "Oh yeah, by the way, this is the story of how I became the world's greatest hero." And it's like, okay, all right, that's pretty cool.
Yes. This is his origin story. And so to close out, oh my God, English is not working for me today. To close us out, Psyche, what can you tell us about what makes somebody a hero?
Honestly, I think a person's strength, and I'm not talking about physical strength, I'm talking about mental strength and all that, determination, as we see with Deku, like even though he had been told multiple times, like it's not going to happen, he was still determined to make it happen. And I also think it's important to acknowledge the supports that you have around you as well, because a lot of heroes don't do it on their own. A lot of heroes have sidekicks. They have people in their corner that are cheering them on and helping them when they really need it. And I think that that's also what makes people a hero. Is it's not just our own like strength and determination pushing us forward, but also the supports and the sidekicks that we have around us at all times that are continuously, giving us the strength and determination to move forward.
I would add to that, connect with your values. Doing the things that you know are right, despite the risks, because this is important to you. Izuku was acting the way he did because it was important to him to be selfless, to be, the person that tries to help others, despite the risk to himself. And again, common theme, Izuku doesn't pay attention to risks to his bodily health. And that's a running theme in the whole anime, even to the current episode / chapter of the manga. He still struggles with that. And it just, we'll get there. But, being a hero is not just I, it's we. There's more than just one person to make up a hero. And I mean, look at all the, heroes of comic books and movies and everything. They've all got somebody that supports them, if not directly, then indirectly. Batman has Robin and the whole he's got a whole Bat family. He's got a whole Bat family. He's even got a dog.
Ace.
So, having support can look like so many different things. It doesn't always have to be someone fighting side by side with you directly or directly, doing something for you. But sometimes it's someone listening, someone there to just say, hey, I got you. Someone to say, I hear you. That is, I think, what really makes somebody here is when they can connect with their values and share those values with the people in their lives.
Absolutely. Remember, it isn't just I am Groot. It is we are Groot.
We are Groot. Oh my gosh, yes. And so I think this is a really good moment to close us out. Stay tuned for episode 3, dear listeners, titled Roaring Muscles. And I would like to say, while we are the heroes of this show, we cannot do it without our own hero support team, because as we just said, the hero is not I, it's we. So I'd like to thank our audio editor, Kyle Rebar, our graphic designer, Ali, I forgot her last name, but she goes on Instagram as Wicked Encounters. I need to remember her last name. One of these days I will remember it.
One of these days we'll get it.
And thank you again to our sponsor, All Mind Health, and Dr. Isaac Tights for sponsoring our podcast. All Mind Health is a psychological corporation in California, seeing patients all over California via telehealth and in person in Orange County area to help you become the hero of your own journey. All Mind Health can be found on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, at All Mind Health. And how can people continue to support us in our hero's journey?
People can continue to support us by following us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at My Hero Therapy. Or if you guys would like to interact with us in a more, formal setting, you can email us at myherotherapypodcasts@gmail.com.
And if you guys happen to be Dr. Psyche, I saw somewhere that you're going to be at another hero mission coming up.
That was yesterday.
Oh, it was yesterday. Oh, darn it. Never mind. I was going to invite...
Edit that out, Kyle.
Edit that out. Okay. Well, but for anyone who might possibly be going to Los Angeles Comic-Con. I am planning to attend. I cannot say more about what I may or may not be doing there, but seek me out. If you want to say hi in person, give me a high five. I don't know. I like high fives. Fist bumps. Just don't blow my head off, Bakugo. But thank you, dear listeners. Please follow us on the social medias. Listen and rate and review us wherever you can rate and review us. It really does mean a lot to us as we are growing this new podcast and starting up on our own hero journey. So thank you, everybody. And until next time, go beyond.
Plus Ultra.